Whilst I was studying human services, I was also working for the Native Title Tribunal, and that was a very exciting time for me because it was just after the Mabo Act had been passed in Australia. And I was eventually sent to Darwin to set up the registry there and start the whole native title process up there. And I felt that I didn't have the client contact that I once did. So we're just performing, a range of perfunctory administrative tasks. And for me, I didn't get much gratification out of that. I decided to go and just purely do music for an indefinite period of time. I was basically playing music most hours of the day. I was playing in 2 rock bands, and it was a very fun time. All the musicians would interact freely and share instruments and share music as well.
It's good to see that the bleak weather hasn't driven the crowds away.
But ultimately, that experience, after about a year of doing that, I've really felt the need to actually be of service directly to other people. Music is very important for me. It's a plaything, it's a fun time, but to me it's ego-driven.
That was completely everyone else's cake.
It's like dessert, but the main meal for me has to be helping other people and trying to make the world a better place. I returned to Perth, and that was in 1999. I ended up working with people living with disabilities, particularly young men with muscular dystrophy. They were the same age as me, but they were dying. So I was in my early 20s, they were in their early 20s. I had 60 or 70 years ahead of me, but they were at the end of their days. And to me, this just wasn't fair. This was something that was very difficult for me to comprehend. So it was those kind of injustices, those kind of inequalities in my life that made me start searching for a spiritual paradigm. I decided to walk a long-distance walking trail called the Biberman Track. Basically, the lifestyle is getting up each day and walking for 8 or 10 hours. Initially, I was craving things that I always had, living in a domestic situation. After a while, I realised I was very happy with that simplistic lifestyle. It was whilst living out on the Biberman Track that I got to explore some of the questions I had about the world, about consciousness, about existence. And it was using what was around me to answer those questions. Nature became the paradigm by which I began to view the world. So in May 2000, I travelled to Bangladesh to fulfil an Australian volunteers posting at a drug rehabilitation residence, the main demographic of which was street kids from the streets of Dhaka, which is the capital city of Bangladesh, a very overcrowded, overpopulated, underserviced country, and definitely suffers from a lot of the social and economic problems that have never been resolved there. During that first year, I began to burn out to a certain extent, mentally and also emotionally.
No, I can ask you the same thing tomorrow. Can I get an answer like Sasha? No.
So I spent a lot of my free time going to mosques and ashrams and Buddhist temples and talking to the people there about what their paradigm was. And it wasn't until I tried Buddhist meditation that I experienced something different.
Turn the mind to the mind. It's the only part to remain.
By performing that practice, after a while the thinking mind actually stopped. And the result of that silence was that I felt very happy. and I felt very peaceful.
Music's I don't know, it's an easy way to capture a lot of suffering. You can put a lot of suffering and a lot of existence into a song. It's kind of like a nice therapy to being in a human existence. Whereas meditation actually goes deeper into the mind and deeper into silence. This music's just creating more frequencies in the end.
By the end of that time, I felt like I'd achieved what I'd set out to do. I'd definitely helped the rehabilitation to become more established and started some new projects for them which were of great benefit. So I returned to Australia, and one of my top priorities at that stage was to find a very good meditation teacher. Meditation was a very important part of my day. It was a very important component of the way I interacted with other people. I'll just get you to push out against my hands.
Okay.
Oh, okay, a little bit weak. Can you pull back against my hands? The most important thing about nursing for me is that it's something that's inherently worthwhile. What I find is that after I've finished a shift, even though I might be physically exhausted, I feel like I've achieved something very worthwhile, something that's helped people and been a force for good in the world.
Everyone's worthy of compassion. They're trying, everyone's just trying to get by. They're just trying to get a bit of happiness. They're trying to get away from suffering. And some people got different ways of going through that process.
I feel like I've got more balance in my life, and I've got a few more insights into the way that my mind works. But that spiritual urgency still remains, and I'm constantly looking at ways to get more leverage on understanding my existence and getting insight into the way my mind works, what leads to happiness, what leads to suffering, and trying to apply that in a meaningful way.
We spent the night screaming for rounds homemade. There's never been one for all that gone. Can't be believing that this is the perfect place for us to stay. So to the riverside,